Okay, so this week's module focuses on soil. And so we're going to examine how soil develops, the physical properties of soil, and the role of soil in the context of ecosystem function. So in the far right-hand corner of this slide, you can see my kids Noah and Maggie conducting a very thorough experiment, trying to figure out what exactly is this stuff that we call soil. And what you guys need to know is that soil has two primary components, both an inorganic mineral component and an organic component consisting of organic material decomposed to varying degrees. Soil is not uniformly solid, right? So it contains airspace occupied by oxygen and other gases as well as water. We refer to bedrock as soil parent material. So the weathering of bedrock results in the loose mineral component of what we call soil. So that loose mineral component may be altered by several things that we're going to get into shortly. We also need to recognize that there are living organisms within the soil that play an important role in the maintenance of soil tilth, or what we can refer to as soil health. So to put it another way, soil is a natural body with physical, chemical, and biological properties that are governed by the interaction of a lot of different things. So again, parent material dictates the characteristics of the mineral component of soil. In western North Carolina, a good portion of our soil is derived from granite-based parent material, and this results in sandy, relatively acidic soil. Climate plays a role in that the amount of solar radiation and precipitation of a given area influences the decomposition rate of organic material and the nutrient holding capacity of the soil. Soil organisms, including various bacteria, fungi, earthworms, they play key roles in the decomposition of organic matter on the forest floor, and that really influences the availability of nutrients that trees need. Local topography, especially here in the mountains, influences soil depth, the water holding capacity of a given soil, and the amount of available nutrients within a soil. The interactions of all these factors contribute to the development of soil over a very long period of time. So this slide provides an illustration of the soil cycle in a pretty broad context. So again, the cycle begins with the weathering of bedrock. The process of weathering involves the wearing down of bedrock through the action of either water, wind, or ice in the case of the movement of a glacier. The abrasive action of these mechanisms results in the loose mineral component of soil. That loose mineral material is then transported again, either by water, wind, or ice, and deposited throughout the landscape. This mineral soil supports plant biomass, which in turn supports animal biomass. As plants and animals die, that organic material is incorporated back into the soil as soil organisms go to work and kind of conduct this process of decomposition. Under favorable rates of decomposition, the amount of organic material, and as a result, the amount of available moisture and nutrients available to trees, increases over time. Okay, just to reiterate, this process of weathering involves the wearing down of bedrock to form the mineral component of soil. This is fundamentally different from the process of erosion, which involves the movement of soil from one place to another. To put it in simpler terms, weathering involves the creation of loose mineral soil from solid rock material. Erosion involves the movement of that soil from one position on the landscape to another. There are several processes that may break up bedrock as part of this weathering process. As I first mentioned, the abrasive action of water, wind, and ice results in the wearing down of loose sediment from solid rock. As water freezes, it expands, so where there are seasonal temperature fluctuations, the freezing and thawing of water may cause bedrock to crack and break. And plants also have the ability to crack rock as roots develop. This part of the weathering process is really of a much smaller impact when compared to the other mechanisms just described. This slide here shows a fairly involved chart, so don't get too overwhelmed with this thing. All I really want you to take away from it is the fact that not only are there several mechanisms that actually wear down bedrock to create soil, there are mechanisms that transport that material as well, and they're similar mechanisms. So this weathered material, the loose mineral soil that's been created through weathering, can be transported by water and typically deposited in lakes, streams, or oceans. It can be carried by ice and deposited as that ice melts. And this is essentially occurs with the movement of glaciers, or it may be carried by wind and deposited as well. If we take these soil forming mechanisms kind of one at a time, we find that the type of bedrock or the type of parent material that the mineral portion of soil is derived from has a large impact on the presence of essential nutrients in the soil. The chemical characteristics of the bedrock directly influences the chemical makeup of the soil. The slide here shows an image of a granite rock outcrop at DuPont State Forest in Transylvania County in western North Carolina. And much of the soil in this area has developed from the weathering of this type of parent material. When granite weathers, as a result of its chemical composition, it results in relatively acidic soil. There's also, a limited amount of calcium and magnesium present in this type of soil, and those two nutrients are typically scarce, right? They're typically important for plants to utilize and typically scarce in soil, and so a soil derived from this type of parent material lacks those essential nutrients to an even greater extent. These soils also tend to be sandy in texture, and this concept of soil texture we're gonna look closer at in a moment. The effect of climate on soil is something we went over pretty extensively in some of our previous lectures. And there's two things that are really playing a part here. First, the warmer the climate, the faster decomposition occurs and the faster nutrients are made available to be used by forest vegetation. Second, the greater the amount of precipitation, the more nutrients are lost from the soil through leaching. So, the nutrients that are lost tend to be positively charged chemical elements like calcium that are important for tree growth and often very limited in abundance in the soil to begin with. So the process of leaching could have a substantial effect on the inherent fertility of a given soil. And we can't forget about the living components of the soil either. So bacteria, fungi, nematodes, earthworms, they all play an important role in soil health. First, these critters make available essential nutrients through the process of decomposition. Remember that the nutrients essentially recycled from dead organic material are in a form most readily used by trees and are therefore the most important source of nutrients for trees within this ecological system. Also, soil organisms improve soil moisture and nutrient holding capacity by aerating the soil and incorporating organic material. If any of you all are gardeners out there, these little guys are doing the same thing that you're doing when you double dig an area to start a new bed or turn in compost or a cover crop into the soil. They're just doing it a lot slower. Topography has a big influence on soil productivity, especially here in western North Carolina, where we may have substantial topographic changes over relatively short distances. The accumulation of organic material and the depth of soil is influenced by the steepness of slope. The steeper the slope, the more shallow the soil and the less organic material that can be supported. Also, steeper slopes have a limited capacity to retain moisture and nutrients. The term aspect refers to the cardinal direction a slope is facing. Southwest-facing slopes are slopes with a southwest aspect. These slopes tend to receive more direct sunlight. They tend to be drier and thus less productive. Northeast-facing slopes tend to retain soil moisture to a greater extent and are thus more productive. For this reason, also wildfires are more prevalent on south and southwest-facing slopes when compared to north and northeast-facing slopes. For these reasons, in the southern Appalachians, we see some pretty dramatic changes in tree species composition from one landscape position to another, even within a small geographic area. This slide displays the vegetative communities that would be expected on a portion of DuPont State Forest based on topography and soil type. We're not going to get into the characteristics of each expected forest community, but what should be apparent from the map is the effect of topography on the distribution of these communities. For those of you not accustomed to looking at topographic maps, the contour lines indicate elevation and steepness of slope. Each contour line on the map represents a 20-foot change in elevation, so for every 5 lines that you see, there's a change in elevation of 100 feet, uphill or downhill. Contour lines that are really closely spaced, as is the case up in the northern portion of the map, represent very steep areas as the change in elevation occurs within a shorter horizontal distance. So what should be clear from the map is different communities are represented on different parts of the landscape. These changes are correlated pretty closely to changes in topography. So that wraps up the soil forming mechanisms part of this. Now we're going to look a little closer at the physical and chemical properties of soil and how those properties develop within different ecosystems. As soil develops over time, it develops in layers. So a soil profile may reveal what we refer to as soil horizons. Not all horizons are present in all soil types. We're going to take a look at each layer here in turn with the next few slides and examine how each layer contributes to the characteristics of an individual soil type. Starting from the top down, the O horizon consists almost entirely of organic material in various states of decay. The O horizon may be composed of decaying plant material, including dead leaves, branches, and roots, as well as dead animal material and excrement. So the O horizon is really important to soil productivity as it is a consistent source of nutrients for plants as decomposition progresses. Also, the O horizon acts in large part as a big sponge, really increasing the moisture holding capacity of the soil and protecting the mineral soil components from erosion. The A horizon consists of what is commonly referred to as topsoil. This horizon tends to be darker than the lower horizons as there's a fair amount of consolidated organic material present within it. Over long periods of time, nutrients may leach from this horizon into the lower horizons, but this portion of the soil is typically a great environment for plant growth. There's typically a relatively high concentration of nutrients in this area. The E horizon is really only present in soils that are subjected to significant leaching over an extended period of time. So think about soil in warm climates with consistent precipitation. Here, this layer is very light in color as nutrients have been leached out and no organic material is really present.